I'm going to get started. If more people come in, they're welcome to join, but they threatened us not to go over. So I'm going to just go ahead and start the party, if that's okay. My name is Angie Jones, and this is my co-presenter. Introduce yourself, Kirah.
Hey everyone, my name is Kirah Sapong.
All right. And we are going to introduce you to a brand new protocol. It's open. It's a messaging protocol that enables you to move money across borders. And this protocol is called tbDEX. So what I'm going to do is give a brief overview of the protocol, and then Kirah will jump into a more interactive session so that you kind of get your hands dirty a little bit, okay? So I want you to meet Maria. She's an entrepreneur. She left her small village in Peru to relocate to New York City. And Maria has this brilliant idea to import artisanal crafts from her village and sell them in New York's vibrant art scene. So she finds buyers. She lines up suppliers. She's all set to launch her business, but there's one problem. The payment gateway that she intends to use requires a long list of identity verifications, including documents she doesn't have as a recent immigrant. So Maria tries to set up her cross-border payment directly with her suppliers, but the fees are through the roof, right? And each financial institution in the chain wants to verify her identity in their own specific way. So essentially what Maria needs here is a frictionless way to operate her business in two different currencies at any given time. So Maria is frustrated. Her business is stalling, and in her village in Peru, like, this wasn't a problem. Her identity was established through relationships and through community trust. But a rude awakening for her in the global world of finance. She's wrestling with logistics and realizes that she's up against a system that pretty much is fundamentally broken. So I want you to imagine a scenario where Maria could simply open an app and she can instantly access this competitive marketplace of financial providers, each one of them competing to offer her fast and fair currency conversions. This is not just hypothetical. This is what's offered with the tbDEX protocol. So it's a communication protocol, and it enables like this permissionless network where anyone can seek liquidity and financial institutions can offer liquidity, while also specifying the regulatory requirements that are needed to fulfill this request. So there's three types of actors on a tbDEX network. There's wallet applications, or like payment apps. These hold things like identifiers and credentials, and they work as an agent to facilitate exchanges on behalf of someone who is seeking liquidity. Then there's the participating financial institutions. We call these PFIs. These are entities that provide the liquidity on the network. And then there's the verifiable credential issuers. So these are trusted organizations or individuals that provide digital credentials which can be used within a transaction to establish trust and to facilitate those regulatory compliance obligations. Now, every participant on the network has a decentralized identifier, also known as a DID, okay? This is an open W3C standard. The subject of the DID, meaning the person or the company that's being identified, they own and control their identifier across the network. So it's not restricted to just one payment application or just one liquidity provider, but this identifier they can take with them across the network. Now, the DID essentially acts as a URI that associates the DID with the DID document, and that document contains more information about the DID subject. So you can think of this as like a key-value pair where the DID is the key, the document is the value. And that document is just a JSON file, and it's going to describe how to interact with the DID subject. So it contains things like the DID's public keys. So there's public and private keys involved here. It also contains how to authenticate and verify this user. There's also a service section that specifies how do I interact with that DIS subject. Now, this is important in the context of tbDEX because if a financial institution wants to participate on the network, they must add this PFI type of service and specify the URL to use to communicate with them using tbDEX. And this is essentially the domain where other tbDEX participants can reach them. All right. Now, the PFIs will have a predefined list of offerings, much like a menu of services they provide. Given you have the service URL for a PFI, you can obtain their catalog of services by calling an offerings endpoint. So all of the PFIs will have implemented this offerings endpoint. And the offering contains things like the currency pairs that the PFI is offering, payment information such as what type of payment methods do the PFIs accept, what methods would they use to pay the customer, any associated fees is listed here, and also the claims that are required from the customer in order to fulfill the offer. I want to talk about that required claims a bit more. So for each offering, the PFI specifies if there are any requirements the customer must meet in order for them to complete the transaction. So for this particular offering, the PFI is indicating that the customer must be able to prove that they are a known customer, meaning they've already undergone KYC with this institution. And the required claims are to be satisfied by verifiable credentials. All right, so let's talk about verifiable credentials. Now, the issuers create and distribute verifiable credentials. An issuer could also be a PFI. This is also an open W3C standard. They work hand in hand with the decentralized identifiers to enable the trusted interactions. So here's an example of a verifiable credential. The PFI would perform a process to verify the identity of the customer, so, IDV, then would issue a verifiable credential with claims that the customer has indeed completed this process. Now, verifiable credentials are essential on the tbDEX network because a PFI could have a presence in hundreds or thousands of wallets across the world, right? You don't want to have to re-perform KYC every time you engage with that customer. Why is your eyebrows raised? Did I spark something for you? Yes, okay. You're just listening, processing? Okay, yeah.
So is the verified credential so that belongs to that user or that belongs to the PFI?
Great question. So the verifiable credential, the question was, I'm going to repeat it because we're on camera, but the question was, does the verifiable credential belong to the user or customer, or does it belong to the PFI? It belongs to the customer. So the PFI issues it to the customer, which they could store like on device or in some sort of identity wallet or something like that. So no matter which payment app you use, let's say I'm using PayPal or Cash App or Venmo or whatever else is out there, if I have this credential on device and on the back end they're using a liquidity provider that I've interacted with in some other app before, by me having that credential, that PFI knows I've already done KYC on this person. We can just start transacting. All right? Okay, so this particular credential is known as a known customer credential, which, if you remember, this is what the PFI specified as a requirement in their offering. And we see the issuers did here, so we know that the PFI issued this themselves. And then we have an expiration date. So the PFI knows when they need to re-perform KYC. And there's evidence here of the checks that were done. But notice the details of that information are not exposed because verifiable credentials are designed to be privacy preserving. So you don't want this stuff just kind of swapped back and forth, customers PII, across the network. So it's just saying like, yes, I have done these checks. Then here is the subject of the claim. So this is the person that the claims are about and any assertions that are being made about them. And I want us to look at how all of this works to help Maria exchange between PEN and USD using tbDEX messages to facilitate this exchange. So let's say Maria has a digital wallet. It has her did, as well as credentials from Peru, as well as like newly acquired ones from New York. So Maria uses her wallet to request USD in exchange for Peruvian sol, which she'll use to fund that artisanal craft business. So she has 10,000 PEN. She wants to see how much USD can I get here. When Maria clicks exchange, the wallet is going to loop through the list of PFIs in their curated network. So it doesn't matter how many liquidity providers are out there, the payment application can pick and choose which PFIs they want in their app. You know what I mean? And then they'll use the tbDEX SDK to call get offering. So this is going to make a HTTP request to that service endpoint that was in the DID document. Remember that? And what's returned here is an array of all of the offerings that the PFI has. The wallet can then compare the currency codes from each of the offerings to determine if any of them match what Maria entered on the screen. And then the wallet aggregates these matched offerings from all of the PFIs on their network. So let's say that there are 3 PFIs on the network who have offerings for PEN to USD, and each one of these requires KYC information such as like the name, address, date of birth. Acme Bank here also requires a phone number. Finders Financial Services requires a sanctions check. So Maria's wallet could present all 3 of these offerings to her and allow her to choose the best option for her. That's one implementation. You're free to do this however you want. A payment app might make that decision for her on the back end based on, the fees or things like that. But in this case, they allow her to choose. Maria doesn't mind paying more to go with the most trusted PFI, so she chooses Finders Financial Services. Now Maria's wallet is going to prepare what's called an RFQ, which stands for Request for Quotes. So this is a tbDEX message which includes things like the offering ID from the PFI's menu, the payment methods that Maria has chosen, and the required verifiable credentials, right? All right, notice the claims here. Remember the PFI's offering specified that a known customer credential is required to satisfy KYC. So Maria allows her wallet to present that verifiable credential from a past time that she transacted with Finders Financial Services. And the wallet is able to do this using the tbDEX SDK. So the select credentials method will compare all of Maria's verifiable credentials, because now she has these from quite a few PFIs as well as whatever other credentials she has. It's going to compare those against what the PFI is requesting and will only select the ones that satisfy that requirement. So since the PFI has already done KYC, again, that credential can be reused to attest that, yes, this information has already been verified. Okay, so now that the wallet has constructed an RFQ object complete with the required claims, it can now cryptographically sign this message using Maria's DID, and then the wallet sends the message to the PFI. So when the PFI receives this RFQ, they'll be able to verify, yep, it's authentic, it's not been tampered with because of that cryptographic signature. And then sending the RFQ officially starts an exchange between Maria and the PFI. And what the wallet is doing here is asking the PFI for a quote specifically for Maria. And that quote may differ from the listed offering based on what payment methods Maria selected, right? If she selects to pay with a credit card, for example, there could be like an additional fee applied there. Yeah. The quotes, so the PFI can also add an expiration date. So that's one of the properties in the quote message, to add an expiration date for, or expiration time or whatever, for how long this quote is good for. Good question. All right. So here's the quote message that my friend just asked about. This gives the exact details of the exchange, right? Including the payment details as well as that expiration date for how long the quote is good for. And since Maria is using a stored balance from her wallet and the funds will go to her bank account, the PFI is able to keep the fee the same as what was specified in the offering. Now, the wallet receives the quote and it displays this to Maria. Notice, Maria also has an option to cancel. So if she doesn't like the quote, she can terminate this exchange. But everything looks good and she clicks order. So at this point, the wallet is going to create the order message and then submit that to the PFI. The PFI then settles this transaction however they see fit. So this part is not done by tbDEX. So you use whatever rails you're already using to do this. Now this is where it might get competitive, you know what I mean? So for example, if I find a faster rail to send money and my estimation time is 30 seconds and another PFI says, oh, 2 to 3 days, I'm gonna be winning, you know? All right. As the PFI is processing the order, they'll send order status messages back to the wallet, which they can display to Maria, let her know what's going on with the transaction. And then once completed, the PFI creates a close message. So this is the final tbDEX message of the thread. And in Maria's case, her exchange is completed successfully. So within a matter of seconds, Maria was able to convert from one currency into another, all right? So that's tbDEX in a nutshell. I am going to hand it over to my colleague, Kirah, now, who will go more into an interactive approach with this. While we swap out, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Yes.
So in that example, Finders Financial had you already had the claim for the KYC data, but you showed like Acme Financial or Acme.
Right.
Maybe you hadn't interacted with that PFI before. How then would you
Obtain that credential.
obtain that credential?
Yeah.
Or, documents being uploaded or
Right,
whatever?
right. So if you haven't interacted with that PFI, meaning I cannot find in any of your credentials something that'll satisfy what they're looking for, then you would put them through the IDV flow. So one of the liquidity providers is Yellow Card. So they're pretty big in Africa. They service 22 African countries or something like that. So they have a widget that these payment apps can basically embed within their app. So let's say that this person didn't have a credential from Yellow Card, the app would then present that IDV flow through Yellow Card's widget.
And then you would have the claim.
And then you have the claim, and then you just pop that in with the RFQ. Yeah. Someone else had a question?
Yeah, I would say the KYC or compliance process is usually one of the largest friction points in apps where you can have a trouble. Is there a way to share credentials? Like I get KYC Wells Fargo, and I'm doing a transaction with Citibank. Is there a way to use my Wells Fargo KYC with Citibank? Or do I need to do KYC with each individual?
Yeah, that's what we're aiming to get toward. Legally, I probably can't today, but there's a lot of banks and companies that are lobbying for this exact thing. We want to be able to reuse KYC. So if, in your example, what did you say, Citibank? Let's say I have the credential from Citibank and Wells Fargo says, oh, I trust Citibank. If they've already done KYC, just give me the credential. Kirah's from Canada. I steal your story, so I'm just going to tell it. But Kirah, in Canada, there's 5 major banks. All of them go to the same IDV provider. Any other bank in Canada is a subsidiary of these 5 banks. So basically, there's one IDV guy, And so if this company is the one issuing the credential, all of these banks would have to go there anyway, so why can't they just trust this credential? So that's what a lot of folks are working towards, let's be able to reuse this stuff and work smarter, All right, I'm gonna hand it over to Kirah now.
So just
Okay, go ahead.
The blocker there is regulatory or government class, right?
Say it again.
The blocker there is regulatory.
The blocker there is not the tech, it's the regulatory stuff. And because this is global, every country is gonna be different, right? There are rules, so some countries may allow it, some may not. It depends on where you are. So that's why we leave it up to the PFI to specify what are your requirements, right? Yeah. And so that one where I showed you, okay, I'm looking, you have to present a known customer credential that has been issued by my DID. You can expand that to say Citibanks did, Wells Fargo did, or this other banks did, right? And you can say, like, of these three, if you have one from any of these, you're good to go. All right.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Angie. Actually, can we just like a quick round of applause for that? Thank you so much for that. That made the rest of this workshop much easier. It gave us a lot of needed context. So let's take a look at the end-to-end flow that Angie just described for us. So the PFI is first going to create that offering, and then the wallet is going to get offerings, submit an RFQ once they find an offering they like, send a quote, or sorry, the PFI is going to send a quote. The wallet is then going to submit the order, and the PFI is going to send a series of order statuses followed by a close in a successful, happy path end-to-end flow. So let's take a look at our workshop checklist here. We're gonna go ahead and build a wallet. So who's ready to write some code? We've got a few people, a couple people.
Don't leave if you don't want to write code. We just don't watch it.
So we've got a couple people in the room ready to write code, is that right? Yeah? Awesome. All right, so here's our checklist for us. So first we're going to choose PFIs, and don't worry, this will be written later. You don't have to remember this right now, but we're gonna get PFI offerings, choose the required credentials, create an RFQ, verify our RFQ satisfies the offering requirements. We're gonna sign that RFQ, submit the RFQ, get exchanges from a PFI, create, sign, and submit a close, and create, sign, and submit an order. All right, so we had some resources for this workshop. If you didn't get a chance to download these repos, you can go ahead and do that now. So I'll give you a minute to do that. You can scan the QR code or go to the URL at the bottom. I'm just gonna give you a minute. See if we've got everyone ready. And when you're ready, just like stick up your hand so I know we can keep going. Yeah, actually. So does anybody have any other questions we can answer while we wait? One question?
Are multi-hop payments possible, like with multiple PFIs? Like if, your source and destination currencies aren't paired at a single PFI?
That's a good question, actually. I don't think I've been asked that before, but no, I think Angie might, though.
So we are working on this spec that's called like the interop profile. So we're not done with it yet, but we are working for that very solution. So let's say that, like, I want to, in Maria's example, PEN to USD. What if, like, none of the folks have that exact conversion, but somebody has USD to X and someone has X to PEN or something like that, right? So that would be where I could do the multi-hop with that interop profile, but the PFIs would need to implement that interop profile. So we haven't, we've like kind of designed it, but haven't started the development of it. But all of this stuff is open source, so if anybody is like super interested or you need that like for your business, feel free to like jump in, let us know in GitHub or whatever, and we can prioritize it.
Awesome, good question. Thanks for that answer, Angie. Okay, are we ready to go? How are we looking? We're good, seeing some nods? Okay, perfect. All right, we've got another QR code here, and this is for our developer docs. You may need this along the way. You can refer to it at any point. The URL is also just at the bottom, and even if you're not writing code today, you can feel free to follow along with the docs. All right, so we are going to start with some code. Let's see. I am going to... Just give me 1 second here.
Anybody got questions on me? Y'all have really great questions, by the way.
Definitely. We're just gonna switch this up here. Okay, perfect. So everyone can hopefully see this here. So why don't we go ahead and open a terminal window. In one window, I want you to open up your workshop mock PFIs window. Does everybody have that? Awesome. Okay, awesome. Now, does everyone also have a Docker installed on their machine? Because you will need that for this. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, let's give you a couple of minutes to get that. If not, it's pretty quick to install. So I'm just going to pause for about 2 minutes. We'll take any other questions that are in the room. Any cues? Yeah? Perfect.
I haven't heard of PFI before. Is that just kind of like any bank that participating in the program?
It's a great question. So yeah, it's a liquidity provider. A liquidity provider will provide liquidity between two currencies. As long as they're a node in the network, then you can consider them a PFI. That's a great question.
So it could be a bank or not a bank.
Okay.
And then there is one more question too.
How does the PFI join the network?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the really great thing about open protocols, like I love open protocols for this reason. It's a way to join a network in a permissionless way. If you speak tbDEX, so to speak, you can join the network. So we have a specification up. We have 5 different implementations across various languages. You can write your own implementation in a language if it's not supported yet. And just using that implementation, you're able to join the network. Effectively, what you need is a decentralized identifier. We have libraries that help you create ones quite easily, but it's very easy to create one. And then you just need to be able to hook into the tbDEX network by following the protocol. So you don't need to sign up anywhere. You don't need to effectively join anywhere. You just need to be able to support the tbDEX protocol. But that's a great question. Okay, cool. How are we doing on the Docker install? We good? Yeah, okay, no problem, because we can also follow along here too. So the first thing we're gonna do is install our dependencies. So hopefully we also have Node installed. So you can just do npm install or npm I. And then the next thing we're gonna do, if everyone's done that, is we're just gonna run our server with npm run server. So what this is doing for us is it's setting up some mock PFIs in a network. Once it's up and running, we're actually gonna have some mock liquidity nodes to call from in the network. So how are we doing? Was everyone able to do that step? Doing okay? Hands up if you were able to get there. Okay, cool. We got one hand. How are you doing over there? Yeah. Okay, cool, cool. Is anyone else following along on their machine? Okay, cool. This might be a lot of me, so just ask questions as we're going along. Cool. So if you head over to your other terminal window, we should have Workshop tbDEX Wallet in another window. And once you're there, we're just gonna install our dependencies again, npm install or npm I. And then what we'll do is we'll run our wallet. And it's not gonna show us a heck of a lot yet because we still have a lot of work to do. So I'm gonna run npm run dev, and this is going to open our wallet locally. And we're gonna just see what that looks like. So again, we're not gonna have any liquidity nodes to call from yet. So let's go ahead and do what we need to do to finish up this wallet. So you can go ahead and open this wallet in the IDE of your choice. I'm choosing VS Code. I'm gonna have to blow this up quite a lot because the font is super small, but can everybody see that? Pretty okay? Let's see if we can just get rid of that. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see this okay. So our first to-do here is we actually just have to choose some mock PFI DIDs using info about the services they provide. So we have 5 to choose from here. These are the 5 liquidity nodes that are on our network currently. So for example, if I only wanted my wallet to surface PFIs that provided exchanges between African currencies, I could look through these and see that Aqua Finance passes the test, Swift Liquidity passes the test, Flowback Financial only offers exchanges between USD, Great British Pounds, and Canadian, so I might just remove them. Vertex Liquid passes the test, and then Titanium Trust also passes the test. So I may end up with just these 4 liquidity nodes that I'm supporting in my wallet. On the other hand, if I only wanted to support USD and USDC exchanges, I might get rid of any that didn't pass the test. So Swift Liquidity would be out, Vertex would be out, and then I would be left with Aqua Finance, Flowback, and Titanium Trust. So even though this is a permissionless network, for my purposes, if my wallet is serving a customer segment, I can select which PFIs I want to surface in my wallet. So oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you re-articulate the liquidity nodes? So that's serving up what PFIs exist.
Right, so
So this code has known liquidity nodes that you're joining.
yeah, that's exactly right.
Is there a list somewhere for
That you can access.
liquidity nodes or
Yeah, that's a great question.
go up a level and like how do they play?
No, that's a great question. So one huge thing here is discoverability. How does one discover which nodes are actually in the network? So a lot of that comes down to the liquidity node and making sure that they are marketing that they're in the network and that they are providing that discoverability for themselves. Once you have a known list of nodes that are in the network, and at some point it may be reliable enough that, for instance, in Canada, if all 5 of the major banks and all of their subsidiaries were in the network, they would publish that, they would promote that, and that would aid in the discoverability. You would be able to reliably get their decentralized identifier, and then you'd be able to use our tbDEX SDKs in order to surface all the information that you needed to know about them. So liquidity provider itself doesn't need permission to be in the network, but in order to discover them, you're going to need to be able to do that somehow. There's no real central place that they're being surfaced. Does that help answer that? Okay, awesome. So in this case, for example, like I know and I've heard that these 5 nodes are liquidity providers. And so I can actually filter through these and decide which ones I want to provide. And there may be much more than these 5, but for the purposes of this workshop, we're only aware of these 5. So I'm going to keep all 5 of these liquidity nodes in this case because I'm going to pretend that I'm actually a global wallet and I want to provide services to customers all over the world. So we have a to-do 11 here, and we're going to come back to that at the end. But let's continue on. So the first thing we're going to see here is our state. Take note of a couple of the properties here because we may need them later, particularly our customer DID and our customer credentials. So let's see what our first method here looks like. We have something called fetch offerings and a to-do here that says we need to fetch offerings from PFIs. What we're doing here is we're looping through the PFIs in our allow list, which we noted just in the step prior. And now we need to get an array of all the offerings that they've published on the network. So now I'm going to need everyone's help. If you recall the developer documentation, we're actually going to be able to get the answer from there. It's going to be a little bit like a scavenger hunt. If you find it, don't jump ahead, but if you do find it, I want you to just shout it out and we can all kind of work together on this. Does anybody need the QR code to the developer docs again? Yeah? Okay, awesome. pop up here. Great. Awesome. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple minutes to look, but has anyone been able to find anything that has to do with fetching offerings or getting offerings? Yeah? Just shout it out if you find it. Cool. Does it offer any kind of an API call that we can use? Awesome. So that's definitely the one that we're going to use. If anyone didn't hear that, that was get offerings from a PFI. So what that's going to look like is we're just going to call from our tbDEX HTTP client, get offerings. And this actually takes an argument as well. We're going to want to pass our PFI did. And we're going to get that just from our PFI URI up here. So just like that, we're able to get all of the offerings that this PFI has published to the network. And we're going to push those offerings to an all offerings up here. And we're just going to store that in our state. So our next method here is creating an exchange. And this is really where everything starts to happen. So to do number 3, choose only needed credentials to present using presentation exchange.select credentials. So we're going to scavenger hunt this again and see if anyone can find what we need to do here. I mean, there is a clue right in here, but we need a little bit more information about that. So I'm just going to go ahead and start typing this out, but I know that I need to pass some arguments. So does anyone know what arguments we need to pass? Can we find that in the docs? I'm going to give it a couple minutes, and if anyone has any questions in the meantime. Are we ready to keep going? Was anyone able to find anything there? I can see my friend in the back is definitely searching hard. Yeah, that's definitely one of the arguments. Good find. VCJWTs. Now that's VC JSON Web Tokens. I'm just going to call that JOTs going forward, but whenever I say that, what I mean is JSON Web Tokens. So what can we pass to our presentation definition? And we're going to see how good everyone's memory is. We talked about this a little earlier in the presentation as well. Any ideas? Well, I'll give you a hint. We do pass some arguments to our method. We pass offering, amount, and payout payment details. So our presentation definition is something that we're going to find in our offering. And it's going to be our offering.data.required claims. What this is just everything that the PFI needs in order to verify that they can do business with us. So this is going to contain a verifiable credential that says something like we're not sanctioned. And the way that we're going to select that is by passing all of our verifiable credentials, and this method is going to pull out the ones that satisfy those required claims. So earlier we looked at the state, and we made a note of our customer credentials so that we could use it here. So now that we have our selected credentials, we can move on to our fourth to-do here, which is create an RFQ message so that we can request for a quote. So this one is going to start by just calling create on RFQ. And we're going to pass a few properties to it. One is metadata. And this just contains all of the metadata for our RFQ. It's going to say who it's from, who it's going to, and then one more thing, which is what version of the protocol we're using. That's just going to ensure compatibility. So we're going to go from, and again, we're going to call something from our state, which is going to be our customer did, and we're going to get the URI for that. It just takes a string, and it's our customers did. We're also going to send a to, and we can get that value, which is going to be the PFI, from the offering that we are sending this RFQ to, based on. So we're going to go offering.metadata.from, because that is going to be the value of our PFI's did. And then the last value here is just protocol. We can safely plug in 1.0, as that's the last, latest stable one. And then we're going to pass one more value here, which is data. And data is going to contain quite a few properties. So I'm just going to pause here for a second. Let's take a look at the developer docs again, and let's see if we can find what properties belong in data. Awesome. Yeah, offering ID is good. And this basically just associates our offering with, or our RFQ with one of the offerings. So since we're passing, that is, yeah. So since our PFIs have different offerings that they'll surface in the network, and that could be like, if I'm willing to exchange Canadian dollars for USD, I would publish that as an offering. And if I was also willing to exchange USD for Mexican, I would publish that as an offering. So as a PFI, I'm basically saying, I can provide liquidity for your Canadian dollars, or I can provide liquidity for your Mexican currency.
Right now, you're doing your request for quote, so that response option will have your one-time.
That's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So what he asked was, once we do our request for quote, that should provide something that can be used one time, and that's a quote. So the PFI will end up responding to us with a quote. So we'll go ahead and get the ID from our PFI's offering, just so we can associate that our request for quote is based on this offering. And we need another property here. Based on the docs, does anyone know what else we can pass into our RFQ? Yeah, that's definitely right. Awesome. And pay-in takes a few properties as well. So it's going to take kind. We can get that from our offering as well. There we go. So now we can get kind from the offering. We can also add one more property. Does anyone know what that one is? Perfect. And we pass the amount into our method here. So we can go ahead and pass it there. And then the last thing that we need to provide are payment details. But in our workshop, we actually don't require any payment details. We're just getting it from something called a stored balance. And in our workshop, that's going to be something called TB dollars. So we're storing a balance for all of our customers. They all get 100 TBD dollars off the hop, which is really, really great. So we need another property here. We've got pay in, we've got offering ID. What else do we need? Yeah, that's right. Awesome. And now this also needs kind. So we're also going to get that from our offering. And then this actually does need payment details because it needs to know where to send that payout to. Now we passed in payout payment details into this method, so we can just go ahead and use that. And then we just need one more property. Does anybody have an idea what that is? Yeah, that's definitely right. Awesome. So where can we get claims from? This is going to be a recent thing. So how How good is everyone's memory? Where can we get claims from? And one hint is that claims is what we're claiming to be true about ourselves. It should match, or it should at least respond to the required claims that we found in the offering. Any ideas? That's off of the offering, so that is a good guess. But in this case, we're basically using claims to communicate information about ourselves. So what would that be? Not use store. This would be some data that we're able to provide about ourselves. For example, if required claims said you should not be on a sanctions list, I would need to be able to provide some way to prove that I'm not. So what would that be? Yes, that's right. Verifiable credentials. And earlier, we selected the credentials that we needed for this particular offering. So we can go ahead and pass that into claims. Super good answer. Awesome. That's right, yes. In fact, it probably even helps to look at an offering. So let's just take a quick break here and go see what that looks like. We're gonna have to blow this way up too. So let's see what a typical claims looks like. Or I'm sorry, a typical offering looks like. This might be a little too big. Great, yeah, good idea. Okay, so let's just look at like our very first offering here. So an offering will look like this, if we all remember. It has a description. It also has payout units per pay-in unit, which is effectively our rate. And then it also has a payout property. So it tells us what it's paying out, in this case USDC. And we also have an array of methods here, which means when we're paying it out, how are we paying it out? It's communicated as a JSON schema. And so in this case, we're able to see that it needs to accept an address, specifically a USDC wallet address, needs to be a string. We can also see that it should settle within 24 hours. And we can also see that the kind is an enum known as USDC wallet address. Now our next property here is pay in. And this one also has a currency code. So TB dollars, which is what we talked about earlier. And we also have an array of methods here, which means it just accepts stored balance, and it actually does not require any payment details. And then the last property it has is something called required claims. Here it tells us what format it's looking for. So it's looking for a JSON web token verifiable credential with an ES256 signature or an Edwards Curve DSA signature. And then it has input descriptors, which means how many VCs is it looking for? The number of objects in this array corresponds with the number of verifiable credentials it needs. Each of these can have another field called constraints, which basically says there are certain filters or limitations to the VCs it will accept. In this case, it will only accept a VC who has a property called a type, and it should be equal to known customer credential. So that means it should be a known customer credential type. And also a property called issuer, which should be equal to an issuer did, which we pass here. So that's what our offering looks like, and we can use that to inform some things about our RFQ. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Can you do a quote for a payout amount, like based on the destination amount?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so like passing in how much you want to receive? Absolutely. I mean, so that would be on the client side, right? Like you could basically build out your UI so that you're doing a lot of that on the front side. You have your payout units per pay-in units, so you can use that to infer for the client what they would need to pass in for pay-in in order to get the payout. Does that make sense? It would. But you could do some simple math there, and then, yeah, exactly. That's a good question. Okay, cool. So to do number 5, verify offering requirements with RFQ. So this one actually gives us a pretty good clue right here. We're going to go ahead and just call RFQ.verify offering requirements, and we're going to pass it our offering. What this does is it actually verifies that we've satisfied the requirements for the RFQ before we go ahead and sign it and before we go ahead and send it. So we can go to number 6 here, and we can go ahead and sign our RFQ message. Based on the docs, does anybody know what we need to do here? Any ideas? What's that? Say again, sorry. We need to sign our RFQ, and we do sign it using the customer identity. I think if that's what you said, then yes, absolutely. Yeah, perfect. So we're going to go ahead and sign it. And again, we're going to call our customer did from state to do that. So it's passing a bearer did, which contains all of our key material that we need to sign it. So yeah, great answer. So to do number 7 is now we just need to submit the RFQ message. Any idea how we can do that? And this is in the docs as well. I'll give you a second to try to find it. Yeah, definitely. Good answer. So cool. We'll just go ahead and pass that our signed RFQ. And it's going to do a lot of work for us in the background, but that's all we need to do on the client side. So we can move on to do number 8 now, where we get exchanges from the PFI. This is in a method called fetch exchanges. Does anyone know what method we can call to get exchanges from the PFI?
You can guess without the dot. What would you name it? If you needed to get exchanges from a PFI, what would you name that method?
That's great. Great, so let's go ahead and get exchanges. Now this also takes an argument because we need to know who to get the exchanges from. We're gonna go ahead and pass it the PFI did. Now we're passing a PFI URI to our method here, so let's go ahead and use that. We also need to say who it's from, and we need to prove that it's coming from us. So we should probably be controlling the did and the keys that we're calling it from. So we're gonna pass it something called did, and we're gonna pass it our entire customer did. Awesome. And then now we're moving on to do number 9. So we're gonna add a way to close your exchange in case we don't wanna proceed with an order. So we pass it a few arguments here, and we're probably gonna make use of those. We need to create the close message, sign it, and submit it to the PFI. So just like we did with our RFQ, we're going to call a method called create on close, and we're going to pass it some information. Once again, we're passing it metadata, and it's almost all the same properties. We're saying who it's from, and that's us. We're passing the URI. And we're saying who it's to, which is the PFI URI, which we just passed into our method here. And the last thing is we need to actually associate the close with an exchange. So we're just going to pass it exchange ID, which we're, again, passing into our method. And we pass some data as well, which is just the reason for the close. We've also got that in our method. So with that, we have created our close, and now we need to sign it. So just like we did with our RFQ, we're just going to go ahead and sign it with our customer did. And then lastly, we need to send the close. So we need to submit this close to the PFI. Does anyone know what we call to do that? Say again? Right. I mean, that's like, that's a good guess for sure. Yes, that's definitely right. Good call. So we're just going to go ahead and submit close, and we're going to pass it our close. And then now we're on to-do number 10. And this is going to look very similar. So we need to create an order message this time, sign it, and submit it to the PFI. So just like we did before, we're going to call create on order, and we're going to pass it some metadata. And it's going to be all the same information. We're going to say who it's to, and we're going to associate it with an exchange. We don't need to pass any data to the order because all we're doing is saying that we would like to proceed with an order. But we do need to sign our order. So we're going to go ahead and do that with our customer did again. And then we just need to send it. Does anyone know what we would call to submit our order? Not quite, but it is similar to something that we've used before. Closer, but not quite that one either. So if we want to submit an order, what do we want to call? Yeah, perfect. Submit order. And we're just going to pass it our order again. Okay, and that was actually our last to-do. So we had one last to-do here, if we remember. And that's a surprise, surprise. All we want to do at this point is we want to test our wallet and see if we can actually interact with all of the PFIs that we've allowed. So let's go ahead and save that. Let's go ahead and go back to our wallet. And this part might take just a moment, but let's see if we're able to send any money. What's cool is since we have launched all of the mock PFIs locally, we can actually see all of the calls being made here. So I'm going to pause here while we're waiting. Also, if anyone needs to catch up to this point, just give them a second to do that. Any questions in the meantime? Yeah, go ahead.
For signing the RFQ, it talks about signing with a bearer bid. For signing an order, it talks about a portable bid. Are those the same or different?
They're different, but that's a really, really good question. There's a distinction there, which is pretty great. The bearer did abstracts away any of the key material so the client couldn't accidentally leak that. So you can use a bearer did to sign messages with your private key material, but there's no way for a client to access that private key material in a bearer did. A portable did, on the other hand, does share the private key material, and so it would be very easy to leak that information. And we never want to be leaking our private key material, so for all intents and purposes, we only ever want to use a bearer did. A portable did is just so that we can effectively port our did and our key material associated with the did between applications. So if I've created all of my key material in one application, if I need to use that same did with the key material in another application, I would use that portable did to basically import my did and my key material into another application. Does that make sense?
And is there a reason why you use one for the RFQ and one for the order?
Yes. No, that's okay. Yeah. So we'd use a bearer did so that we're not passing that key material all over the place or passing that key material around on the client side.
So when you use the bearer did is when you need to use something with the key right? So when you're signing a message, or when you need to call get exchanges, so they're able to basically verify that you are who you say you are. But if you're just like sending a message out and you're like, this is the DID string, you don't need the whole bearer DID for that. You could use like just the kind of DID URI part.
And then the portable DID would be exactly that. And the portable DID would actually show all of your key material. And I can actually show you an example of what that looks like here.
That doesn't go to PFI, does it? Just the wallet app to be able to sign it?
That's right.
The tbDEX SDK to be able to sign on your behalf, like cryptographically, but it's not being shared.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is an example of a portable DID. So we obviously wouldn't want this information traveling all throughout of our client application. But you can see here that we actually have a property called private keys. In a bearer DID, this is all abstracted away. We can still utilize our keys, but we're not actually passing it around, which is good. Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so as a customer, at what point are you committing to the order? This is a good question, and there's a bit of a nuance to it. But you effectively commit to the order when you send the order. At that point, the PFI accepts it, can process it, and if it's really fast, for some reason it's able to do all of this in 1 second, it might just process the whole thing, fulfill it, and everything in 1 second and send you a close, and at that point, it's all said and done. On the other hand, it may take a while to do that, and some regulations say that a customer must have at least 30 minutes to cancel an order. So if you've submitted an order, it hasn't been processed, or it hasn't been fulfilled, and it's under 30 minutes, or whatever the regulations in a given region prescribe, then you haven't necessarily committed to the order because you can still cancel it. Yeah, that's a great question. Any other questions before we move on? Yeah. Yeah. If you don't know if you've sent it, so you're able to get exchanges in order to see what messages exist in a given exchange. So let's say you've lost the connection. If you're able to get exchanges, you can actually see exactly what exists there. There's also a mechanism in the protocol so that if an exchange contains an order already, an order would not be a valid next message. So there's also a prescribed order of messages and what messages are allowed to come next after that. Really good question. Okay, so it looks like we have access to some currencies. And we're going to select USD for the from currency. And we're going to go with Ghanaian cedis for the destination currency. So let's go ahead and see who's offering that. And it looks like we have access to Titanium Trust for that. They're willing to exchange our US dollars for Ghanaian cedis for 7.4 to 1 US dollar. So it looks like we actually require a credential for this offering, but we can actually just create that right here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my name, and I'm going to share that I'm from Canada. So let's create credential here. Looks like everything was good. Our required credentials are available. Let's say I want to send 100 US dollars. They'll get 740 Ghanaian cedis. And this was a question that was asked earlier, is if they wanted to first say how much destination funds they wanted, we, as the wallet, could simply reverse these fields and just reverse that calculation to show them how much they would need to send instead. So I can share my phone number, probably not my real one, And let's do my network provider. Actually, I don't know what cell phone company I have, but let's just say T-Mobile. I don't know any of the U.S. network providers yet. So request for quote. Let's go ahead and see what that quote looks like. So it looks like it's processing.
So what's going on in the background right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, it is calling to the PFI, and it's submitting an RFQ. So if we remember what we did earlier, we created that RFQ, we signed the RFQ, and then we submitted the RFQ. And we used all of the information here in order to do that. So right now, it kind of looks like it's hanging a little bit, but it's actually making a call to the PFI in order to submit that RFQ against our offering. Can you say that again, sorry? Good question. So that was actually handled for through our tbDEX implementation. Yeah. So I could create a DID separately if I wanted to, and that's where portable DIDs and bearer DIDs come into play. Or I could just come here and do it all through the tbDEX library, which surfaces that method for me. So I'm just going to go back here, and let's actually choose a different currency exchange. Let's do USD to Great British Pounds. So we have Flowback Financial, which is giving us 0.82 Great British Pounds per $1 US. So in this case, I can say 100 USD again. I'll just plug in a bank account number. This is part of my payout details, and then I'll plug in a bank name like Wells Fargo. Let's hit request for quote. And since this is hanging too, we're just going to try one more. Yeah, I don't know if it's the network. But let's try one last one here.
What is the source of currency rates?
So that will be in the offerings. And it's going to be something called payout units per pay-in units.
Does that automatically update the changes of currency?
Yeah, so a PFI would be responsible for that. So for example, they might choose to do it with like a cron job once a day or something like that. They might end up like caching them for the entire day because it can be like quite a load to constantly be, updating that. But that's completely in the PFI's wheelhouse, and they can choose to do whatever they want there. So let's see, what if we do Ghanaian cedis to USDC? We've got Aqua Finance Capital. We're going to send 100 Ghanaian cedis and get 11 USDC. And we're just going to plug in a USDC wallet address. And if it is hanging here, we're going to go back to our code and see if there is a promise that we didn't await. And my guess is yes. So let's go ahead and debug this and see what we've missed here. Now, it's a good chance that it's somewhere here in our create exchange method. So we select our credentials. That looks good. We create our RFQ. That all looks good. Okay, I definitely see something that's missing. Instead of making you look in the docs for it, though, I'll go ahead and tell you. We actually needed to sign our RFQ. So let's go ahead and try that again. Oh, yeah, you're right.
I guess I could dig into the code, but what does the signing do on the, like, when you sign up for the account? Is it like, do you have to, like, verify that you're the right person, or is it just, like,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's signing these messages so that those messages can have a signature associated with it. And because this is a decentralized network, it just provides that layer of trust so the PFI is able to independently verify that signature. Because, yeah, exactly.
The part that's in the message itself is just the did URI string. So I literally could copy your string and put it in mine, and I'm like, oh yeah, what's your name? I'm Wade, and I wanna order X, Y, and Z. So there's no way to prove that I really am Wade unless Wade has signed this message cryptographically. Yeah, exactly.
I know exactly what we did here. So we just need to make sure that we're actually passing a string here. Small little bump, but let's go ahead and pass toString on our amount here. And then we're going to try that again. So let's do our Ghanaian cedis to USDC again. We've got Aqua Finance, and we're going to send 100 Ghanaian cedis to get 11 USDC. And we're going to plug in a USDC wallet address. And we're able to get our quote back, which is great. So right now it's polling for exchanges that we have. And it's able to find that we've been quoted 100 Ghanaian cedis from our PFI. And we can see the details here. So the sender is us. The recipient details, this is the USDC wallet address that we indicated. The amount they'll get is 11 USDC. And we can also see an expiry date associated with this. So that's May 1st, 2028 is when this quote expires. So we've got a lot of time to decide, but right now we can either cancel or we can go ahead and submit our order. And a question earlier was, at what point do we commit? As soon as we click this button, we effectively commit, because it's going to take almost no time at all. And we've got it. So we've now settled this transaction, sent 100 Ghanaian cedis, and that's it. Thank you all for following along. Yeah, the documentation is there. So if you have any questions, you can definitely find us and reach out. Read through the docs. Build a wallet, build your own mock PFI node and get it running locally. And yeah, thank you so much for following along. Yeah, that's great. Are there any questions? Yeah.
Okay, so now explain closing the order.
Yes.
So when you hit the submit button, you didn't close the order at that point.
That's right. I didn't. I hit submit button, the submit button, and I submitted an order at that moment. So after that, the PFI would be responsible for sending me order status updates or a close. And a close is the terminal message in the exchange. One of two, but yes. It's a good question.
So you didn't see it because the PFI did. And so like Kirah mentioned, the protocol version that's most stable right now is 1.0. And we just released this in May. So we're working on 2.0 right now. And 2.0, we were overloading the close in 1.0. So in that flow where we were like, oh, if the customer wants to cancel, then she can close. Otherwise, the PFI closes, right? So now we've added a new message called cancel. So that's just super clear. If the customer wants to cancel, she sends a cancel message. And then close is now only for the PFI. So once the transaction is done, the PFI sends the close message.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Great question. So right now, there are a couple ways. Pardon? Oh, great. So Angie mentioned Yellow Card a little earlier, if you recall. They're serving about 22 African countries. They're live on the network right now. And the hope is for many to come live. It's possible right now for PFIs to self-service as well, because again, it is permissionless. You can use one of the SDKs that we've developed, or you can write your own implementation following the protocol. But right now, yeah, Yellow Card is live on the network.
We, like I said, we released this in May, so now people are using it. So, using it to build like either their PFI or their wallet app. So Yellow Card just finished like last week. Live is a loose word because I just found out. They were like, yeah, we are live, but we haven't tested it yet. So like, don't send us anybody just yet. So, but like I do have like their DID. I have their URL. I can see their offerings and stuff like that. But there was like a lot of companies that were basically waiting on Yellow Card to become live because they want to integrate with that and basically have that liquidity there. And so I'm hoping we'll see that. There's also Chipper Cash. They also want to be a liquidity node, and they do African currencies as well. And then there were a couple of companies in Latin America that are also working on integrating this right now. There's a couple of wallet apps that are just basically waiting on those liquidity nodes to be ready with the green light on, and then we'll see some movement. So I'm hoping within the next month or so we'll see some action.
Yeah, great question. Any other questions? Still got a couple minutes. Yeah.
The decentralized and what seems to be implicit trust model, what are some of your security concerns that you're either wrestling with or building into the app to make sure that you really know you're talking to people? We talked a little bit about it, but I'm curious on that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the key material is really, really key here. Making sure all the messages are signed is one of the ways that we do that. But we also are working on a trust model, and we actually have a trust foundation that is looking to solve that exact problem. That's definitely a problem that exists. Is the burden of trust and the root of trust there. So that's something that we're working on. And Angie, actually, do you have any news on that? Yeah.
Yeah, so like even from the PFI standpoint, like one is as a wallet application, let's say that you say, oh, I have a PFI, I'm available. How do I know I can trust this PFI to put in my network? Because if you screw the customers, that looks bad on my app. They don't know about some PFI on the back end. They don't care, right? It's your problem. And so we're looking at in that trust foundation of like, how do we even establish trust with the liquidity providers so that people know that they are trustworthy. And then, even then, for every offering, that's cryptographically signed by the PFI as well. So you can't get an offering that like somebody claiming to be Bank of America, for example, that's not. You'll be able to quickly see that that is not,
Great question.
There's also like, remember, and when I talked about the three parties, I talked about the PFI, I talked about the wallet, but then also the VC issuers. So there's like companies that specifically work in like identity verification or like Clear is one example, right? They're like, oh, I have all this data on people, Experian, I have all this data on people. I could attest some things about folks, right? And so they could work as a separate entity that's not involved in a transaction itself, but could supply and issue like these verifiable credentials to folks.
Yeah.
Tackling money laundering or anything like that yet, or is it just grow the user base?
Yeah, so the PFIs themselves, so we were, I don't know if I said this, but like TBD is a part of Block, which is formerly known as Square. And so we're a publicly traded financial company. So we have to be careful in all of this, like because it's decentralized and permissionless, we have no say on what people are actually doing from a compliance standpoint. And we don't want to, right? But it's up to every PFI to like work with their compliance officers to figure out like if anti-money laundering is one of the things that you need to be checking for, then you better be checking for it,
And one of the ways that we do that, again, and one of the ways we enable that with tbDEX is through required claims. So with AML laws, there are a number of things that a PFI would need to collect if they have to abide by those laws, right? So they can communicate all of that in the required claims, and a customer could basically support that they pass all of those tests just with verifiable credentials. Yeah, great questions. Any other questions before we wrap up? No? Okay. All right, well, thank you all for following along again. It was really fun coding through this and building a wallet with you. And yeah, like I said, if you have any other questions, definitely find us.